Okay, we got CraigBot running. Cool. So I think we can just get started and then people can funnel in. Hey everyone, thanks for joining our ZK Salon today. As you probably saw from my announcement in the events channel, we're gonna use this time to just talk about the current state of the incentivized testnet and what all of you need to know moving forward. Just for some additional context, for those of you that don't know, typically these zero knowledge salons are just open discussions that we have with our community about many different topics. It usually changes every week, but again, since we're in the throes of the testnet, that's what we wanted to focus on today. Additionally, if you're new to this format, we will give people the opportunity to ask questions. So if you want to verbally ask a question, you can raise your hand and we will bring you up on stage. You can ask away. Alternatively, if you look to the left-hand side of your screen in the menu bar there, you'll see that we're in the Aleo assembly voice channel right now. Right above that, there's a text channel, which is called calls Q&A. So if you want to type a question, you can feel free to do it in there, and we will run through all of those questions to try and answer them to the best of our ability. But I think before we get into specific questions, I think our team just wanted to maybe give like a couple just general updates. So I don't know if maybe Alex, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to Zero Knowledge Salon this morning, and I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, thanks to everyone who's continuing to participate in the community and provide feedback and run nodes and just thank you to everybody for being here, and thank you for all of your efforts. It's greatly appreciated, as I've made this point before. But we are, this is an open source public project that really is you all are the lifeblood of it, and so again, really appreciate all of the efforts that you guys have put into being here and supporting Aleo up to this point. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is I just want to acknowledge that the testnet has been much more competitive than we had initially anticipated, and I think probably there's a couple of things I want to say about it. On the one hand, everything is arguably working too well. I think for us, or for the chain, the cumulative weight of the chain right now is very high, which means security arguably is high. We're seeing actually folks who are mining on the network using somewhat specialized hardware, aka GPUs, that they implement. That they figured out how to do before we ended up being able to release our kind of canonical implementation. So the incentives are working very well. Unfortunately, we didn't anticipate that. Unfortunately, for many people who are frustrated, I don't think we anticipated that it would be this competitive this soon. However, the chain is more or less stable. And I do want to just highlight that there's about 150 people who have successfully mined blocks. And there's actually a few dozen who've mined several blocks. And so I would just remind everyone that this is day one. We're still technically on day one of the incentivized testnet. There's a long way to go. We're going to be shipping fixes throughout to make mining more efficient, to make syncing more efficient, to overall improve the health of the network. We're going to, again, a huge priority for us right now is to enable pooling, to enable individuals to pool their power into a collective greater whole. And I think all of those things will fundamentally help on the mining front. So for all of you who are in there and haven't won a block yet, I would say, again, don't give up. It's still literally the first day, and we'll do everything that we can to help make that experience a little bit better. If you have technical feedback, and many of you have already done this, and this goes back to point one, which is thank you. Please open an issue in GitHub and document it as best you can. We have a template in there. And it's very helpful to have these issues open. In fact, Lukash, who's in here, can already address. We've actually addressed one issue with a PR that happened over the weekend, and the issue is related to how we were using timestamps within the block. And so, thank you to the community member who posted about that issue, and just know that we've already addressed it, and I think we've seen some improvement since then. Okay, so that's the second thing I wanted to say. The last thing that I wanted to say is, please reread and abide by the rules of the server. I love and welcome any and all feedback. But if it's not respectful, we're just not going to, number one, it's not a very effective way to give feedback. And number two, we're not going to tolerate any violation of our rules on the server. Just remember that all of us here on the team, not just in this call, but on the team, are working very, very hard on this project and really believe in wanting it to be a success. And, please just assume good intentions on our part, and please act respectfully and interact respectfully with both each other and with us. So that's just a final reminder, and that's the last thing I wanted to say before we can go ahead to questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Alex. I see one person raise their hand, so I'll bring you up on stage, Flex13. You want to ask anything? But yeah, maybe until they come up, we can go through the text channel. Okay. Somebody said, is there a way to manually restart/reset a node from a given block height?
Actually don't know. It's a good question.
Can I ask?
Yeah, let us just answer this question first, then you can ask.
Guys, I have a specific question about, for example, we have 18,000 hash block, yes, and it's correct. But, for example, maybe 90,000, some 400, for example, it's already in fork. So, I mean, a lot of people, they are in fork. And I just want to ask, how can we, for example, get back to 18,000 and make I don't know, cancel all forks to let people synchronize, like node, and after, if all hash blocks is correct until right now, so they can mine, continue to mining. Okay, did you get me? Or
yeah. So the question is addressing forks, and I'm running a client right now, and my client, I mean, maybe others you get. Let me actually just look right now. I'm on a chain with a weight of 4.4 million at block height 20,383. So with regard to the question of forks, forking behavior is like, there will be forks on the network when you get close to tip. Now, there have been some cases where, and we've observed this on chain, where what's happening is some miners are connected to fewer peers and getting further ahead than the rest of the network. And then when their blocks end up hitting, their weight is much higher at a much lower level of the network, or sorry, at a much lower block height. So this is exactly, kind of, again, like this, the incentives of proof of work in some ways kind of encourage this. Now, the good thing is, as more and more miners are able to pool their resources, and as more powerful miners start competing with each other, it will not make sense to do that anymore. It will make sense to try and connect to as many peers as possible to try and find out what the latest heaviest weight chain is. Because if you do what's currently happening, you will lose out on, you will be on a fork, and then you'll lose all of the work that you put into it. So as far as the question of like, can we reset to 18,000? No, we can't, because again, this is a permissionless decentralized network. I mean, we could arbitrarily declare, hey, this is a canonical chain, and say every block at the time of the block minting this is canonical. But unfortunately, that involves direct involvement by us, right? And I think the way we've designed the system, which is similar to Bitcoin and Ethereum, is that ultimately the only thing that matters is who has the heaviest chain. And unfortunately, like I said, sometimes it's common for people right now, I think, to end up on forks. But if you end up on a fork and you are stuck on the fork and you never are able to switch, that's a problem. And please open an issue and let us know how we can replicate it so we can address it. Because ideally, everyone should, as soon as a node discovers a heavier chain, they should immediately or relatively quickly switch so that you can get back onto mining. And last I checked, I believe, and this is from aleochain.io, which, by the way, thank you to the community member who created that. It's a fantastic third-party explorer. But last I checked, the ratio of nodes on the network that are mining versus syncing has gone up dramatically. So I think last I checked this morning, it was around 30, or only about 25% of the nodes were syncing and about 60 were mining. So I'll pause there. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Yeah, hey guys, hey Alex. I just wanted to follow up on the question which Flex just rose. I think he was asking that how can we reset to height 18,000 not by Aleo but by miners, like snapshotting. And we haven't figured out yet how to do it in this chain because we don't have this database anymore. We only have Ledger, which doesn't seem to work as a snapshot.
Okay, wait, maybe I'm confused. Maybe there's an issue that I'm not understanding. And Flex, if this was your question, I'm sorry if I didn't understand it. So last night we gave a block hash and a block height. Said, hey, the incentivized portion of the testnet starts at block 18,000, and I shared the block hash. So are you saying that right now that block hash no longer exists in the ledger?
No, he's saying that past 18,000, he ended up in some fork with the flag is fork equals true. And what we did in testnet 1, we just delete all the database, download snapshot at a certain height, start again. In testnet 2, we don't seem to be able to do it because all the data is stored in the ledger folder. And I think question was about this. How can we as individuals reset to the previous block height and start again?
I see. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And thank you. Sorry, Flex, if I missed your question. Yeah. So actually, Lukash, do we have an ability to reset back to a specific height? If not, that actually is a good feature we should add.
Not on demand, but well, this just suggests that the issue is forking. So we shouldn't want to revert just because there are forks, but rather concentrate on the forks resolving themselves. So this is something that is not needed altogether.
Yeah, ideally it's not needed, right? Hope like in the best case you would just get on the canonical chain. But I know like right now I think there's still it's still kind of early, and so people may be having some issues. And I know there's one issue that someone has already opened around potentially having state corrupted if you close the miner. So I know that's an issue that we're tracking. So Lukash, we could talk about this later in our meeting today, but potentially it might be helpful to let people revert back to an earlier point. So we could talk more about that, but thank you for the suggestion.
And talking of forks, what we notice in chats is some people consistently have a lot of pending blocks, like thousands. And I myself, starting from the day zero, have only like few, 1 to 3 of them. And it makes us think that there is some networking issue probably involved, that these miners can't connect to proper miners, let's say, or proper nodes, and they end up forking more than others. How can we debug this?
I don't think it's a networking issue. I think for some miners, I think this potentially is a conscious choice. This is a strategy that they're pursuing. From what I have seen, and again, so let me just address, is it a networking issue? I don't think it is, but I do acknowledge that there's a lot of miners versus clients on the network, and clients are really important to help pass messages because miners are obviously busy mining. Their resources are dedicated to mining, and clients are needed to pass messages around. So we're going to be, and I can have Fabiano chime in on this a little bit later, but we will be spinning up many more client nodes and trying to distribute them geographically and in different data centers around the world, so as to hopefully better connect the network together. I think what we're seeing is the consequence of a few miners purposely not connecting to very many peers. And like I said earlier, that's a very risky strategy. But I think this is also what's driving some of the deeper forks. is that if you're able to outrun the chain on your own chain and swap it in, you'll get a reorg back however many blocks. The problem is if if the public chain, if the kind of the canonical tip is progressing faster than you can mine on the side in your own island, you'll waste all your time. So that's again one more reason we care a lot about having this pooling capability, because it's going to help it's going to make that behavior much less likely.
Alex, why don't we just take a minute and kind of outline what we currently are thinking for what this pool is going to be and the benefits that it's going to give people?
Yeah, sure. So just look, so if people have participated in other mining pools before, the idea is very similar, basically to let you, combine your individual compute power, in a larger whole, or, as part of a larger whole to mine blocks, kind of as one instead of as individuals. So right now, for those of you who are running multiple miners connected to the same address, one reason why that's not as efficient as a just strictly speaking mining pool is that there is work that each miner is replicating. So for example, you have to generate a transaction, which is the Coinbase transaction, to include in the block. That is extra work. And in our case, in our chain, because this is this is a Zexi transaction. Every transaction is a zero knowledge proof. Like it is fast, but it's not. It's a non-trivial amount of time. Now, if you had a pool, you could have a single node, which would be like kind of the network-facing client in the pool, could generate a template with a predefined Coinbase transaction that then, if they pass to everyone else in the pool, everyone could mine on. And then the way pools work, just to be clear, or just to kind of educate everyone, is that you're paid not per block you win, because there's no way to tell which individual miner, to really attribute individual miners, per their block. But typically you're paid by the amount of compute that you contribute. So there's a concept of shares. And then of course our pool won't be eligible for, bigger rewards as we've outlined in the incentive scheme, but other pools could potentially be. So, hope that's helpful. And Evgeny, do you have any other questions or thoughts? Oh, go ahead,
I just want to add in on the share thing for people that aren't familiar with this term. What a miner share is it's essentially a block solution, but at a much lower, potentially much lower difficulty target than whatever the actual difficulty target is of the canonical chain. So just to use the example of Bitcoin mining pools, if the current difficulty target for the block hashes is 23 zeros on the main chain, if you are a miner contributing to a pool, even though you might never hit a block that meets 23-0 difficulty target, you're still getting paid for, if you hit 16 zeros or 17 zeros or something like that. Right? So that is basically going to dramatically kind of lower the cliff and kind of like the bar for an entry for actually like working your way towards a full block reward.
Evgeny,
yeah.
Here, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that what I mentioned about those who have a lot of pending blocks is not something they intentionally do. It's just regular users who just run the regular script you shared, and they have this in logs. And it's not something they intentionally do, but end up doing.
You're saying intentionally do, and that have a lot of pending blocks that get reorged when a bigger fork drops. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying? Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So look, maybe there's sort of an art here, and we debated whether or not to even have pending blocks, because technically, according to the protocol, many of you may already be familiar, we have a fork depth of 4,096, which means if you're mining off a block that's 4,096 below the current height, you forked the chain, and You will never convert. You will never reconverge. It's a new chain. So it's not canonical. And that is articular defined in SnarkOS. We thought about not even having this concept of either pending or confirmed blocks because it's confusing, but that would have meant, like, for the first 4,000 blocks, no one would have found anything. But maybe, and Evgeny, I welcome your comments or feedback here, does it make sense to not show anything pending or confirmed until the fork depth limit has been passed?
Well, I'm not here to decide for thousands of miners, but it does feel a bit confusing. I mean, how can we use this info? It only shows that we are in fork if we have thousands of pending blocks. I mean, 1,000 pending blocks is already a good sign that you're mining for a long time in some fork. It's unlikely that you produce 1,000 blocks consequently alone.
Yeah. Now that, I think, so again, this might get back to the network connectivity issue, because you shouldn't be mining for that long and have found that and be on a fork. So if you can, or if anyone sees this issue, and maybe Flex, this includes you, it might, so if there's I'm trying to think of how we could potentially reproduce it and figure this out. My hunch is you're not connected to a very good peer set. So maybe we'll look into ways to potentially address this to try and make sure everyone is connected to a good, healthy set of peers. But in the meantime, I would try and reset to just attempt to find new peers. You don't even have to reset the length of the chain. Just reset the node, and you'll start the peering process over, and hopefully you'll get connected to a different set of peers. That could be kind of a simple fix for now. Lukash, feel free to comment if you have other thoughts.
Also, one of the kind of benefits we're going to be getting from running a mining pool for folks is that it's going to take care of a lot of these little random bug squashings, because it's almost going to be more like a service, because all of that responsibility to get all that working correctly falls on the actual the person mining the pool.
It may also help to debug or diagnose this, or get more relations between different parameters, to have RPC call for the miner address or for blocks mined, to hook these miners who mine a lot or those who have pending blocks with some RPC call.
We have that capability, and that's why Explorer, for those of you who didn't see the leaderboard, I forgot to mention, we updated the Explorer, which now reflects weight, not height. The reason the Explorer was out of sync, it was still running off longest chain, not heaviest. So we fixed that. It should now represent the heaviest chain, and so it should more or less be in sync with what you guys are observing. And then, so that, and the Explorer is aggregating blocks mined based on this, right? So the Coinbase transaction right now, we have default set to public. We are going to figure out how to make it easier to expose that. And I just honestly don't know how the Explorer is doing it, but I'll figure that out, and we will have this exposed for you guys, either through RPC endpoint or some other way. Rhett's here, maybe.
Yeah. Background for people who aren't familiar. I'm more of a front end guy, but I am on the Explorer team, so I know a little bit about how this is done. We have essentially like a caching layer that sits in between a pool of sync nodes and the Explorer front end, which is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. That is also why Explorer is a little behind, because a lot of that data is being cached and not like currently up to date with the most recent blocks you guys are seeing in your nodes. But we do have code that is currently implemented in the caching layer for Explorer that can do these cumulative metrics that scan the whole chain and add up like blocks received, etc. We could turn that into a tool, an external tool, or we could merge it into SnarkOS. I don't know what the plans are on that matter, but I do know that we have that capability. I just don't know when it's going to be rolled out to the community.
Yeah, thanks, Rhett. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I just talked to Howard over the weekend about this, and I can't I got to follow up with him, but my understanding is that every Coinbase transaction should be able to be decoded because it's public. I don't know if anyone has tried that RPC endpoint. It does ask you for a view key, and just entering the empty string doesn't work. So I have to figure out exactly what. So short answer, Evgeny, that's coming. We're working on it.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Can I ask question? Hello?
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
thank you. Can you explain one more again why you believe that it's not a network issue, that in network we have a lot of forks, and usually when run miner node, I always stuck in some fork, always. So I believe it's like network issue because in network probably we have low difficulty. So and miners produce a lot of blocks consequence like each miner in time produce a lot of blocks, and it makes like a lot of forks. Can you explain why you believe that it's not network issue? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I think there's like some definitional terms here that we just to clarify. So is it a network issue or a networking issue? I think that's almost certainly a network issue. If there's anything that's working has to do with network, right? On the networking side, as far as like how the code is implemented, forks are expected. Very deep forks potentially are expected now until we have, until the top miners kind of even it out a little bit and make it unprofitable to mine a deep fork. That is a function of the chain getting more competitive. Now it sounds like people are still having issues finding good sets of peers. And again, that is a network issue that we're looking to address by adding more clients to try and find ways to get a better coverage of clients into miners.
So maybe we need to stabilize this issue before we starting testnet 2.
Okay, so what's your suggestion on how to stabilize it?
I don't know. It's your project, not mine.
Yeah, so I
have. Can I?
So go ahead, Flex.
We can do the next thing. Everyone can, if we can do this, get back to 18,000 block. I mean, if I have node, I should do it by myself to reset my blocks to 18,000 if it's in canonical chain, which was you put it in channel like that. 18,000 blocks should be that number, or did you get me what I mean?
Yeah, sure. But if we ask everyone to reset,
and next thing, what I want to tell you, so the people should synchronize like a client to make a node to get back to, for example, right now 22,100 blocks and synchronize like this, but they should synchronize with the people who already in canonical chain, not to the fork, so we should connect to the right IP addresses, but how can we do that?
Well, the thing is, we're not running miners that are the top miners, right? So that's the whole point of this consensus algorithm, is that the heaviest weight chain will be the canonical chain. And yeah, so that's right now, frankly, I don't think anyone from block. So just to get back to your question, Ilya and Flex, that there frankly is no canonical chain from block 18,000. Only after we get to block 22,096 will that actually be the canonical block 18,001 at that point will be on the canonical chain. But I can't tell you right now who mined a block at the latest block with definitive certainty, right? And that's just true. That's true of any network or any blockchain.
Yeah, but as I understand, for example, in Bitcoin, we have such big difficulty that prevent two miners mine the same next block because difficulty is so high, and it's not possible to intersect with other miners. And in your project, we have such low difficulty, like next block will be mined in 5-10 seconds, and that's why a lot of forks happens. So
Yep.
that's why you don't have canonical.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And by the way, in Bitcoin, the behavior that I'm describing, that was first observed in Bitcoin, where people would hold blocks and mine on them, called selfish mining. This was observed in Bitcoin. But I agree that now, look, it's very difficult to do this because the chain is so competitive overall that that it is more difficult to get away with that attack. Now, on something like Ethereum, right, they use a different consensus protocol called Ghost, which gives you credit for uncles, effectively. There's a variety of reasons why we can't use Ghost. Most of them have to do with privacy, like the way we're using zero knowledge snarks basically prevents us from not using Nakamoto consensus. And look, to be clear, we want this to the stability of the chain should naturally go up over time as the mining ecosystem matures. Because as you pointed out, in Bitcoin, it's very difficult because as the mining ecosystem matures, as pools come online, it will become much more competitive. The difficulty will go up significantly. It will be very, very difficult to do reorgs that are very deep. And I think that process, I don't know. I'm open to suggestions for how to accelerate it. I just don't know how to accelerate it other than to try and level the playing field in as quickly, as best as we can. But I think that's the ultimate solution. If we pick a block, I could just pull a block out of block 20,000 and say, this is the canonical height, or this node that's a miner is, because, whoever's mined the latest block, I could just look at them and say, hey, everyone, this is the canonical chain. But it may very well be that there's a heavier chain sitting on a fork that everyone will switch to, and that would be unfair to that miner, right, who is working. And so that's sort of why I'm hesitant to get directly involved in declaring what is the canonical chain in that way. I understand that right now the stability and the forking is an issue, and again, it's something we're working on, and hopefully, anyway, that things should hopefully improve, and I think they already have from the beginning. But yeah, I just don't. Like I said, I'm open to suggestions either here in the chat or in GitHub. Again, I think those are the trade-offs, though, that we have to consider.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I think some other people raising their hand to get on stage, but let's try to go through some of the text questions, I think. So going back to that first one, is there any way to manually reset a node from a given block height?
Sounds like the answer to that is no, and we'll discuss later about whether or not it makes sense to add that as a feature.
Okay. And then somebody says, has the team determined recommended PC specs to run the testnet? Yeah, so if you go to the SnarkOS GitHub repo, you should be able to find that information. Also, we do have a FAQ page where this is covered, so I'll see if I can get the link really quickly.
I can read that out right now because I'm running a node as we speak. It's based on what the process is printing out to my console at the very least. I don't know if that agrees with what's on the GitHub page, but it should be at least 16 cores, preferred 32 cores, at least 16 gigs of memory, preferred 32 gigs, at least 128 gigs of disk space, and 50 megabits of up and down bandwidth.
Yeah, so I just posted the FAQ page in the calls Q&A chat, so I would read through all that. I also gave specs for what I was running in my walkthrough video as well. But yeah, again, like even if you're not mining a block right now, just give it some time. Then you can also wait for when we get the mining pool functionality. That should also help you out.
Yeah. And just one thing to say on that just quickly is like we're making these recommendations. To be clear, there are other things that factor into this, like the networking side, like being connected to a good set of peers has been very important so far. And that's why we're trying to add clients to the network to make sure these messages propagate faster. So that is as important as the peer set that you have is as important as the hardware you're running, at least is what we've observed. And so that's something that we're addressing. But just to be clear, like even if you're running a very, very powerful machine, stochastically, there's a chance that you're not going to be able to mine a block in a day time frame. I mean, I think the longer you run a powerful machine, the more likely it is that you'll mine at least one block. But I think just to be clear, there's no guarantee. We can't give you any guarantees because I have no idea. Your ability to win a block is entirely dependent on your relative power next to everyone else. So I have no idea what everyone else is running, but I do know for a fact there are people running more advanced hardware. And so we'll keep this updated to try and reflect the best of what we're observing. But I just wanted to make clear it's not a guarantee that we can tell you that you'll mine a block. If you're mining on your own, if you're mining in a pool with decent hardware, look, it's very likely you're going to earn shares. And so that's why a pool, I think, is going to be better from a community standpoint.
Cool. Somebody said regarding the height cumulative weight, Alex said it means the chain's more secure. However, I don't know if the team is aware that there is basically a 51% situation right now. They just don't have incentive to actually rewrite the history, but their mining power is strong enough for them to do that. They can mine blocks with weights like this, and then they showed some block data.
Yeah, so there's a couple of very powerful miners on the network right now. That's true. And again, I think so I guess there's two components to security, right? And so let me clarify my question. So one is how difficult is it to mine a block? If it's super easy, I can go and rent out a cloud and attack the network. This is something that we've seen multiple times on other proof of work networks. When the difficulty is too low, they get 51% attacked by just someone who can rent out the CPU. So I think right now we don't have that problem. I don't think you can just rent out a data center and attack this network. That's not what we're seeing because the difficulty is pretty high, even though it's not as high as something like Bitcoin. It is still relatively high that a lot of folks, this is why a lot of people aren't able to mine blocks right now is because the network, it's a relatively competitive. Now that competition is between, this is not a secret. You just look at the leaderboard. It's pretty clear that there's a couple different entities that are more or less competing here. Now, is that secure? Could those entities collude to rewrite the chain history? I mean, if this were a mainnet, yes, they could, right? And this is one of the reasons why we are running an incentivized testnet, so we can observe behavior like this. And I think, personally, I'm incredibly thankful that we're doing this exercise because it is clear that the distribution of the mining power was not what we had initially expected it to be. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think in some ways it's good that there's more mining power than we thought. But I think this is a good thing for us to know and potentially address. And again, part of addressing this will be about getting a pool or pools up online. So as the many people who are running individual miners can collectively beat those top competitors. But look, I think if you look at, and Sam maybe can weigh in on this more, but I think it's it's empirically true across most proof of work networks that the distribution of hash power is an exponential distribution. There will always be, or usually is, a top miner, and then there's a power law on down. This is true of Bitcoin, of ETH, of Monero, of most other chains that I know. Sam, I don't know, maybe you have a different observation, but
there's no escaping Pareto distribution. The Matthew principle is a universal, but we will hope to do the best we can with this pool that we're escalating here internally.
Just and like last thing I'll say is like, remember, this whole conversation, illustrates the fact that we're in a decentralized network, right? Like I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't snap my fingers and fix this. I guess we could change the consensus algorithm out underneath everybody. I would argue that's not really secure either from a decentralized public blockchain standpoint. If we just arbitrarily change the rules. So look, I think I appreciate the point. Thank you for making it. It's a nuanced discussion, and at the end of the day, we don't want there to be a 51% attack on our mainnet, and that's why we're trying to level the playing field by introducing other options for people to pool their power. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. And then maybe I'll go through a few more texts, and then we can let somebody on stage speak, just because I want to get to some people that have been waiting. So somebody said some blockchains release official releases of snapshots. In this case, the Ledger 2 folder that people can pull to sync faster. Okay, I think that's a good point. King Super, not sure if it is the right question for the call. Feel free to skip. Maybe we can just later. But just curious what causes this issue. I faced this issue once. It's, people get this error, main panic that assertion failed, left does not equal right. I actually got this myself, and I'm stuck. I have not been able to figure it out. I posted internally with some of our engineers, but sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Lukash, you can chime in. This is a known bug. What happened is when you kill the SnarkOS miner, it's supposed to shut down gracefully and ensure that the state is maintained. For some reason, in some cases, when you shut down the miner, it corrupts the state. It's a known bug we're working on. Lukash, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, the most important thing here is for everyone who encounters this to report under the issue on GitHub for us to just know that this is still happening, because recently Howard introduced some changes to improve this. So I'm not really sure if this has happened since those changes or not. But basically, if the node is shut down with Control-C, it should shut itself down gracefully, and in theory it should not happen. But if this still happens, then we just need to know that this still occurs with the up-to-date node, and that then we can concentrate on finding the probable cause.
Cool. Somebody said, any chance for calculated uptime for this incentivized testnet? I'm running a 32-core hardware times 5 devices and not even get any block except pending blocks since day one.
Anthony, you want me to restate, or do you want to?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay.
Yeah. King Super said, how do you guys come to the conclusion that the guys on leaderboard are running GPUs? I think Sam, I think you might have brought this up earlier. Is it just because of the huge number of blocks or something else?
I know because I ended up. Yeah, I know because. Look, I guess I don't definitively know, but I have a reliable source that tells me it's true. So I guess maybe I shouldn't say I know for certain, but I am with 95% confidence know that there is better than just commodity CPU hardware being run.
Okay. Somebody said, keep it simple. What can be done now to mine the real blocks instead of synchronizing them all the time? I think we kind of covered that as well. Okay, so Grin, I know are you still on stage? Oh no, they were earlier. Okay. Oh, here. I just invited you back on stage, Grin, but I'll read what you wrote here, and if you want to add anything on, feel free. Does it have any sense to run few miners nodes on one server with different ports? Or I don't know if Grin, you're on stage. If you want to say anything else, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, maybe we can just answer that from the text then. Okay. Wait, does anybody have?
I guess I was waiting for Grin to chime in, but yeah. Does it make sense to do it? I don't think that it will matter. I think what will mainly matter is the functionality that I described in terms of pooling, where and actually, Lukash, do we already have the get block template, get node template RPC endpoints working?
I'm not sure. I can look it up.
Okay. We'll check. Anyway, bottom line is what will matter is this thing that I described earlier, where you basically split the work between a client that looks at the network, gets all the incoming messages, tries to connect to as many peers as possible to know that it's on the canonical chain or on the heaviest chain, at least at the moment, and then pass a block template with a pre-computed Coinbase transaction to a miner running on a separate server that is only connected to that one client, and then that miner generates the proof of sync work. If the proof of sync work is valid, generated at the high that's met the difficulty target, that client then propagates it. That's the definition of a pool. So that's Graham, if you can do that, I encourage you to do it. You'll probably do pretty well. Maybe there might already be people doing this, honestly, and they might be some of the more competitive people on the chain right now.
Hello. So my question was because you said before about good peers that we should to choose some way. So the question is about running a lot of instance of miner to have a chance to get good peers.
Got it. So how do you try and maximize
possibility? Yes, to choose good right peers. That's what question about.
Yeah. So one of the things that you can do is try and just look at the network and the IPs that you're getting blocks from. And I think there's Lukash, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's an RPC endpoint, get connected peers. And so you could look at an IP that's sending you blocks. If that IP is consistently sending you blocks that are on forks that are heavier than yours, it might be worthwhile to get their connected peers. And then you can pass in a command when starting up SnarkOS it's a flag, I think the connect flag, that basically lets you input an IP address specifically to connect to. I'm not sure if you have other suggestions, Lukash, but that's one idea to try for people who are not having luck with their peer sets. I don't know, Lukash, if you have more to add.
You could just restart the node and they would shuffle. Although there are probably a lot of things that can be done to improve peering. This is just something that needs to be measured in the network, and this is a decision that needs to be made if the peers need to be shuffled more often or changing their numbers. There's a lot of ways that can be.
Can I ask one more question about choosing right peers? Do you have any ideas how to improve your algorithm of choosing right peers in your code? I think it's Ledger RS script in your source codes. Because previously you said a lot of that chance to not get in the fork is to choose good peers, but I don't understand how to choose this right peers, and why don't you implement this algorithm in your code if you know how to do that?
So just to be clear, I don't know how to make it optimal for everyone on the network. If we did, we should definitely implement that algorithm. And this is part of the reason why we run this testnet like this, to help find this. And so when mainnet comes around, hopefully we'll have the peering algorithm will have developed and will be more, will be more reliable. And of course, hopefully the network will also be a little bit more stable. So yeah, absolutely. If you have any ideas, and if anyone has any ideas, please open an issue. I think this is, obviously makes a big difference, and we're looking to improve on this as best we can. Lukash, what's our current peering algorithm? I think it has to do, there's some combination of proximity or latency and a mix of sync nodes with regular clients. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, Lukash.
It's been updated recently, so I don't recall if there's anything specific or if they're picked at random, but anything that is tailored towards picking the best peers could centralize the network. So that's just one thing, that you can't really have the best peers and just always choose them. They need to get dispersed a little bit.
Right. Go ahead.
Our people asking what he is doing different than us, and he can find some blocks, and why we can't find it. First question. And second question, this is not question actually, this is an offer. Is it possible to, for example, in the second stage of the testnet, limit it to people who, limit the people, for example, bring a limit and people, for example, earn only 100 blocks or 200 blocks, because if most of community not earn any at least one block, they will be a little bit disappointment. And do you have any how can I say, any solution about it? Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Happy to take that, El Turgo, and thanks for taking the time to come up and ask the question. I hope you're well. Okay, so the first question is, what are people doing different to win? And this, there's the leaderboard. There's a few folks on top. So again, I am very confident that people are running specialized hardware, or at least running GPUs. I have also heard rumors that there might already be a mining pool that is up and running somewhere. Both of those things would give a pretty huge advantage. Now, you can imagine that even if I knew who these people were, if I went to them and said, will you make this public for everyone? There's not a lot of incentive for them to do that, right? It's just like Bitmain doesn't open source their newest ASICs until they've mined the chain for about a year using it, right? Because there's significant capital investment that goes into winning here. And so these are businesses, arguably, that are dedicated to only mining. And they're doing that. So that, again, it is in our interest to make sure that the best person on the network doesn't have a massive advantage over the least good in terms of mining power. We want to try and reduce that gap as a team, as a project, as a blockchain. We want to reduce that gap to be as low as possible. And that's obviously why we're prioritizing things like pooling. It's why we'll release a GPU implementation ourselves. We want to make sure the gap is not enormous. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is so it's very early days in the testnet. We have 150 people who've mined blocks, who, by the way, many of them are not. I've talked to a few people who've mined blocks who are not running terribly impressive hardware. I think one guy's running a 16-core AMD. Another few folks.
I have four nodes running now. One of them 64 gigabyte, and the others 32. But none of them find any blocks until.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's a lot of reasons why you might win a block or not. So, unfortunately, it's not always as straightforward as I have 64 cores, so I should win more of the time. I mean, and again, I think part of this gets to the fact that Aleo is not Ethereum, it's not Bitcoin, it's not Grin, it's not any proof of work project, right? This is a new proof of work algorithm that people are already figuring out how to optimize much more than we thought that they would at this point. But I acknowledge this could lead to some frustration in the community. So I just ask for your patience. I understand if people want to turn off their servers right now, if they feel like it's just not worth it. Look, I think that's a choice you just have to personally make. I understand. That said, let me get to your second question. We want two things out of this testnet. We want, number one, the community to participate in large numbers, because you guys are here supporting us, and we want a lot of participation. And the reason we designed this quadratic incentive scheme is to really, really pay an outsized reward for anyone who even finds one block. On the other hand, if we limit the number of blocks that people mine, what will happen is the best miners will all stop after 200, and then what we'll end up with is a network that doesn't accurately reflect what the mainnet will be when there are no arbitrary limits. And that's the other side of this coin, is we want to simulate as accurately as possible what the mainnet will look like and identify some of these issues which you've already experienced, which are, again, even though, look, there's financial consequences already because we have incentives, when mainnet launches, that the stakes are much higher. So we want to make sure the incentives are powerful enough for the miners who will actually mine on the mainnet to participate here, so we can observe their impact on the overall chain. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I totally understand you, and I agree with you. But my point is, or my expectation is, actually in the end of the testnet, all the contribution should be, at least should be happy. I don't know. I don't say that you should give thousands of tokens, but I think it will be better. Some how can I explain in English this? Some rewards are better for them because they are contributing and they are trying their best, and I think at least you should consider this in the end of the test.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I think it's let's see how things progress. Let's see how it goes. I'm confident that as we progress through the testnet, a lot more and a much greater diversity of miners will be able to win blocks. But it's not like, again, for us, it's not an ideal outcome. Let me take the other extreme, which to be clear is not happening. But one other extreme is like one miner wins every block in the testnet. Like that's clearly not good for us either, right? But like I said, I think we're trying to balance between those two things I described, and I definitely do want the community to feel like there's ways they can contribute and feel like they're being rewarded. But let's see how it goes, and let's go from there.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you all, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Alturko. Appreciate it.
Before we end,
stay if you guys need.
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Can I speak?
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I think the point you're making about 150 folks who have mined blocks. I think this was more so in the early phase. When folks who have implemented specialized hardware have not really jumped in. Like in the later portion, in last 3-4 days or since the incentivized testnet has started, none of these 150 folks were able to mine blocks. Majority of it has been concentrated between maybe 5 to 10 folks. I think that's where the distribution is. I think it's not complaint. I think it's probably, like you have rightly said, it's not something that you have anticipated as well. Many of the folks in the community have had different expectations, and I think that's probably where the Russian community or the Turkish community have everybody has rented a server or invested in hardware, and if not this avenue, I think hopefully the community should have more avenues to participate and contribute and be rewarded fairly. I think that's something. If it is communicated more promptly, I think that would make everyone happy. Right now, the communication towards community has been maybe more communication would help, is what I would say.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that feedback. I do think I think you're what you just said last is right. More communication is always better. And so we'll endeavor to do our best to not just get me and Anthony on there, but a diversity of folks from our team there to answer and address folks' questions. So I think that's a very good point. Again, I think the reality is, just being honest, I think when you're me and it's 1 a.m. and you have kids who are screaming, it's less excited. I'm less motivated to answer questions that are motivated out of anger. And
no, completely understand. I think you are all humans. I think you are trying to present the best of yourself, and I think most of the times you are available. Very very much appreciate the team's dedication so far. I think right now the frustration from the community is as things are going, we don't see. I mean, maximum the community sees maybe 100 folks or 200 folks ending up with even one block, and majority of us, not even mining a block. And I think we should not drop the interest of the cliff. Right now, we are at the stage where community is very excited But at the same time, we don't want them to be super disengaged and or even turn hostile.
I think that's right. And look, by the way, even despite what I just said, like we can always do a better job of communication, and I think it's always more is better. And so we'll endeavor to just step up our efforts there, and hopefully we'll be able to bring a few more members on the team who can with 24/7 coverage be available to answer some of these questions. I think that's something definitely we're also working on, to be quite honest, because we don't want to leave you guys in the cold. And I agree that like we want to keep the community happy. And I do actually want to keep the community happy. So two things would be helpful for people who, would help us in terms of data. Yeah. Like we're trying to take a very data-driven approach and a careful approach to making any changes to the network. Because if we change the rules constantly, if we change the code constantly, we're not going to learn anything over this 10 weeks. With regard to the forking, what we've observed, and we have a crawler that's constantly crawling the network and comparing forks. What we've observed is that right now the vast majority of people are near the tip and are on the heaviest chain. Now, recently there's sort of been this phenomenon where a heavier chain will suddenly get introduced, and a lot of people will switch to that. But I think from what we've observed, there are not that many forks, certainly not hundreds. I think the first day or two there were hundreds of forks, but now I think it's definitely I don't think there's even a dozen. But if you have data that you've been collecting that contradicts that, definitely want to see that, because that, again, we are not, this is the beauty of decentralized networks, right? Like we're not special here. Maybe we're not seeing something. So the more data that you guys can share, the better. That's great. And by the way, any fixes that you guys suggest that do make sense to merge in, we have a feature bounties program. I'm more than happy to retroactively include those fixes in the feature bounties program. We can add that, Anthony. We can talk about that later. But look, I think that would be great. But again, we just want to make sure the changes that we make are careful and are driven by data and not, So that's just like one thing I'll say there. But we do want to try and make people feel as though it's worth their time to be here. So anyway, like you can probably appreciate, GBS fans, I know we talked about some of the incentive scheme stuff. Like the trade-off space is pretty big. We're trying to thread a needle here against a lot of different competing objectives. We could always be doing it better, and appreciate the respectful feedback.
Can I have a quick one on the synchronization? So could you share some details on how Aleo Network Explorer works? Because does it crawl network as in testnet 1? Do you run your own crawler? Or how do you manage to decide which cumulative weight is the maximum one?
We have our own crawler, which is crawling a pool of sync nodes, and it also has a caching layer kind of built into it, so it doesn't run that constantly, and it doesn't run that on every request. It runs that periodically, and then when a request comes in, it returns the most recent results. I do not know how periodically it does that also, and that is also subject to, if our sync nodes are on a fork, then Explorer will also be on a fork. And sometimes if our sync nodes don't even agree with each other, you might see discrepancies with data, but that is currently being worked on. And I think Alex mentioned earlier that we're adding more miner or nodes to our pool. So hopefully when we do that, it'll be a lot more consistent.
Okay, so in regards to adding more nodes, I think Alex said that you're planning to add more client nodes. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're working on that right now with hopefully this week we'll start deploying those geographically, and hopefully that should speed things up on the syncing front.
Basically, anyone who wants to help the network should run Leo node and just help with syncing this way.
Yeah, essentially more nodes, more better, apes together strong, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the number of miners to client ratio right now is really, really high, and it makes it tough to distribute messages. So as Evgeny said, yes, if anyone wants to spin up an extra client node, it's pretty lightweight. Hopefully it shouldn't be very, it shouldn't require a powerful machine even, and it would be very helpful.
Just to reiterate the discussion you had previously is with the time we'll have more higher difficulty, and with higher difficulty we should have broader distribution of rewards per miner. Is this what you expect?
As long as we have pooling. I think if it's higher difficulty and there's no pooling, it will make it less likely that a smaller miner will get anything. But I think if we have higher difficulty with pooling, it will make it more likely that individuals can get stuff. It will also make the chain fork less often because there won't be incentives to run deep forks.
Well, another one is a lot of people try to restart each time they see they are in some fork, or they see the is fork flag is true. Do you think it's not a good idea to do so? Should everyone just keep them miners running and believe it will just get out of fork eventually?
So, my experience running a node, since I've run a node since the beginning, I've run several nodes actually, is that the chain it's pretty convergent. So I think it is better to keep it running and let it converge on its own. Now, I'd say that with some hesitation because it sounds like some people in this network are experiencing maybe it not converging over a long time frame. And if that seems to be the case, like if you look on Explorer and there's a chain with a weight significantly higher than the one you're on, and potentially you've got a lot of pinning blocks, then I think that, I don't know, that's sort of a judgment call. Do you restart it? But I think, and I feel pretty confident in the logic, at least, where if you are connected to a node that has a chain of higher weight, you will switch to it. I've seen that happen dozens of times on my node. But if someone observes opposite or different behavior, then that is something that would be wonderful to get some more details on.
Last one, will we have SnarkOS call later this week to have another sync up and discuss more stuff? Because at this early stage, a lot of questions arise, a lot of things are changing.
I'm happy to. So Anthony, I'm happy to be on. I'll be on, and we'll get if you guys in the community would benefit from it, we'll have a SnarkOS call and we'll figure out. Again, there may be we'll have to figure out who can make it, but if more calls would be more beneficial, we can figure out how to do it. I can stay on. I might have to jump at some point in the next 15 minutes, but I'm happy to stay on a little extra time to answer some more questions. Personally, if anyone has to jump, feel free. I know Lukash or Rhett, if you guys have things to attend to, feel free to jump. The short answer is yes, we'll be able to compete. GPUs aren't that much better than CPUs, that if you pool enough CPUs together, you'll be able to be competitive. So I strongly believe that they will be. In fact, I also have a hunch, again, I don't know this with certainty, but I think that some of the other top miners are running a pool not using GPUs, not using accelerated code. So I think when we have a pool, it will address that. Now, of course, once we release a GPU implementation and we all start running GPUs, that will help make the issue even more. Hopefully, it'll make it even a little bit even more even than it is currently. What was the second part, Anthony? I know GVS fans, you're in, so. So this is my top priority right now. I am doing everything I can to get this out as soon as possible. When I have a better sense of when, I'll let you guys know. But like I said, it is my top priority, and as soon as possible is the time. Yeah, we can. Look, 4,096 is just a number kind of picked, not totally arbitrarily. Bitcoin uses a similar number. But yeah, the difficulty of you have it too high, you end up with a bunch of non-converging forks, right? That at the end, like may never come together, or they just will be different chains in a very real sense. Because if you're on a block lower than 4,096 from the height and you have a higher cumulative weight than the one there, it doesn't matter. this is why the ASICs, like, I mean, if this mattered, you know, in Bitcoin, you could have invented an ASIC in 2017, gone and then just started mining again from Genesis and like replaying all those rewards that Satoshi got for the first year of mining the CPU, right? But that's not how it works. And that's because Bitcoin has this limit of a fork depth, right? So if it's too, and that's why that exists, is to prevent people from replaying back too far. But if it's too aggressive, then, you know, we end up losing people. People will end up on forks. And by the way, these will be the worst kind of forks. All the forks that we've talked about right now, I think a lot of them you will naturally see reconverge, even though it's frustrating to potentially lose, you know, a couple hundred or even 1,000 blocks. But I think, you know, in this case, if we set the fork depth limit to say 400, you could be mining thousands and thousands of blocks and never reconverge. And then you suddenly realize at the end of the incentivized testnet or in the real mainnet that, like, you're actually just on an entirely different blockchain and you've wasted your time the entire time. That's the reason to be a little bit conservative with this number. Although, look, I think if anyone has suggestions as to what it should be, I would highly encourage you to open an issue on SnarkOS, and would be great to have you know, kind of a written out justification, preferably with real in from other chains that are proof of work, kind of some real world examples of how it could be better or worse. I think, again, getting back to the principles that we're trying to follow, data driven and careful is sort of how we're trying to approach this. I think you're wrong, and the only reason I think that is, you know, a lot of you may have even seen, and I've observed, and a lot of people have mentioned that, like, why is my node height going down? That's why it's going down. If you detect a fork of higher weight that's below you, you're gonna revert all your blocks back to that. And at least from what I've observed, that's been pretty consistent. If you're not observing that, then there's a problem, and sharing some logs would be very helpful. Yeah, I think Evgeny did answer it. I think he said, "How do you know 316 is not correct?" I think that's the question. How do we know it's not? We're not going to know right now. I mean, the heaviest chain at some point will tell us which block 20,316, which one of those 20,316 is correct. And yeah, and let's see. It looks like the Explorer's stuck again. I feel like, I don't know. This is an issue that I don't know. Rhett's still in here. Hang on. Let me go back to the screen. Yeah, I don't know if Rhett, if you want to comment on, you know, sometimes I've noticed this too. The Explorer sometimes gets a little behind. Does that have to do with the periodic syncing that you mentioned?
I believe that we should. The periodic syncing thing applies to what, like a group of statistics that we're calling cumulative metrics, which is what we're using for leaderboard and stuff, which is like anything where we have to iterate over the entire chain starting in Genesis to get things like wallet balances, etc. That stuff is an expensive operation, obviously, because it has to start all the way back from Genesis. The just getting the current block and the latest transactions in it should be able to be done pretty quickly. So I don't think that has to do with the periodic stuff. Although I'm isolated from the caching layer that I mentioned earlier because I only do the front end stuff, so I'm not entirely sure if that's implemented in the caching. It might actually be caught up in the periodic refresh.
Okay, cool.
So, that's my way of saying I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, so I'm looking at Aleo network right now, and Evgeny is right. And I have observed this a couple times before, where sometimes the Explorer will just get a little bit behind. We'll get into that, and if there's not already an issue open, we'll open one. Yes, there's a lot. there's a lot to hope for. You know, I mean, again, like if there's, I mean, pending blocks. I mean, again, maybe we should revisit the UI on this. Like, pending block just means that it's not, it hasn't reached. I think what do we have defined as pending? Less than 2048, I think. So yeah, so I think the longer you see that, the better you should feel. And at some point, if it's long enough, they'll become confirmed. That's after 2048. And then at some point after they're confirmed, they'll be actually confirmed, as in like less than, they'll be higher than 4,096 height below, or there'll be 4,096 blocks below the tip. Now, again, this is something that as we're talking through this, maybe we should revisit how we display that and what the definition. We should maybe be a little more clear on what our definitions are around like what's pending, what's confirmed. So we'll work on that. Yeah, let me tell you clearly from our perspective what it means. We don't know because we are not running miners that are at the tip of this network. And I don't know who is exactly or what they're doing. And by the way, even if I did, they probably wouldn't tell us because this is exactly what's their advantage, you know? And this is how it works in every other proof of work network. So we have some hypotheses, which has to do with better hardware will make you produce snarks faster. Pooling multiple instances of hardware together will help you be able to mine blocks more quickly. And potentially there's other things going on too with figuring out how to connect. There's probably someone who's figured out a different way to do it than we're just exposing. Again, I don't know what they're doing. They're clear, whatever it is, the people on the top are winning for a reason. As we learn, optimal is, again, incentive for people to innovate on the hardware. Similarly, what we're trying to do with this is get an ASIC. Yeah, that's a bug. We're aware of it. Lukash, if you're still in here, yeah, you are. Yeah, Lukash maybe can comment on it. But I think Howard actually covered this last week in the Snark West call. If you see that, that's actually a good thing. Because what that means is you're running multiple instances. You're running. That means you're mining multiple, or you're creating multiple proof of succinct work proofs. So that's a good thing. The bug is the error that you're seeing is supposed to be caught, and we have an issue to address it. Lukash, maybe you have more to say, but that's what Howard said last time.
I think it's a Snark VM thing. I wasn't involved in that code, so I can't really say.
Yeah, I think that error derives from Snark VM proof of succinct work. But again, as Howard mentioned last time, that means it's a good thing. It's actually not a bad thing that you're seeing that. Yeah, no, that's right. And then the thing is, like, I don't know if our GPU implementation is going to be better than whatever is being run at the tip, which I think there's some GPUs. There may even just be straight pools using CPUs. I mean, the reality of we can talk more about this on the Snark OS call on Thursday. But the reality of this proof of work is there's parts of it that are parallelizable, which is where a GPU will help. There are some parts that are still you have to run sequentially. So again, this is brand new consensus algorithm, and some of this stuff we have initial kind of benchmarks for, but not, we haven't deeply benchmarked. And so there could be optimizations above and beyond what we provide. So I just want to, again, be very careful here to emphasize that just because we provide a GPU implementation of a miner does not necessarily mean that this will change. So I hope it does, but I just want to be clear, it might not, right? Because there could be other things going on. But as we learn them, as the network matures, this knowledge will propagate, and hopefully sooner rather than later, the playing field will be more or less level, except for obviously the differing amount that people are willing to invest and the cost that they have in terms of energy. All right. Yeah, I think this question was answered by I can't read this handle, but I think it's the same person who posted about the issue. I'm just going to assume Rukama is the right way to say that. Since it's your GitHub handle, so the question's answered in there. So I'll drop in here. So the consensus algorithm is called proof of succinct work. Why is it not possible? It's definitely possible to use another one. The reason we wanted proof of sync work is we wanted to bake the mining. We wanted to force miners to generate zero knowledge proofs as part of the mining process. The idea behind that was because the proof system in which those proofs are being generated is universal, that will mean that those techniques can be applied to making transactions faster on the network too. So that was the motivation, frankly, it's exactly to get to exactly what we're seeing right now is people have figured out how to produce these proofs much faster than we knew was possible initially. And we can talk more about this on Thursday, but like real quick, last thing. So I guess, okay, consensus algorithm, actually at the core of proof of sync work is Nakamoto consensus. So just to be clear, this is not like some new thing from the moon. This is 98% Nakamoto consensus. The main differences from something like Bitcoin, the block times are faster, and the requirement for the proof of work is that it's a zero knowledge proof. There's some other nuances too, and obviously faster block times. For those of you who are familiar or knew how things transpired with Ethereum, like that was the reason why they ended up going with Ghost and not Nakamoto consensus. But yeah, so just to be clear, like the core of proof of sync work is Nakamoto consensus.
I think I already told everything I need to say, and I heard a lot of things that I think it will be explain everything they need. And thank you very much. Actually, I didn't do anything. I think you guys fixed it. Thank you very much.
I have a quick question, actually. For Explorer, would it be helpful if we surface some kind of information on the page just to like signal like then maybe the information on Explorer is actually reflective of the network and not potentially an Explorer backend issue? Because if you look on the Explorer page right now, the most recent block is an hour old, but I believe Evgeny said something about that is actually accurate to the current state of the sync providers, or the highest of all the sync providers. I'm throwing ideas out.
Yeah, so I'll chime in. Others can weigh in. I think it would be helpful for us to run a crawler that crawls not only the sync providers but the network, and that crawler stats kind of be reflected in the latest. You know, we could debate whether it makes sense to show what the sync nodes are showing, because I'm not exact. I think I have to learn a little bit more about what the sync nodes are optimized for. I think they're optimized for boot, so that's like the first thing you connect to if you join, and then you're really that they're there to get you up to speed quickly. But it could be useful to run a crawler to display maybe something other than the sync node state, but you know, figuring out what the heaviest weight chain is that the crawler can find, kind of make that the default. We can talk about that, but I think it's a great suggestion. If anyone else wants to weigh in, feel free.
Bye. Thanks.
Yes. Good day. Bye. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone.